I'm Tom Allen. I work for the Extension Service, and I also have a research component at Mississippi State University, stationed here in Stoneville at the Delta Research and Extension Center. Well, Mississippi is a little unique in that we have several nematodes that cause problems in soybean production systems. We have reniform, root knot, and soybean cyst nematode problems pretty much throughout the entire state of Mississippi. In the western part of the state, we certainly have a larger reniform or root knot component on those acres that have historically grown cotton. Sampling for nematodes is extremely important at this point in time, simply due to the fact of commodity prices, and knowing what nematodes are there can really drive specific management practices, certainly beginning all the way from variety selection. At this point, there are no commercially available soybean varieties with resistance to the reniform nematode, but there are commercially available varieties with good tolerance to root knot as well as soybean cyst nematode. Nematode samples can essentially be taken at any point throughout the growing season. The main difference becomes if you're looking at overall threshold of those nematodes based on the number that's present within the size of soil sample, depending upon what laboratory you send it to. Those will really differ. Probably the best time to take a soil sample is at the end of the season, but certainly taking a sample when you notice a low area in a field or a part of a field that may not be irrigating like the rest, a field where plants are shorter than other parts of the field, or even a part of the field where you look like you have some sort of nutritional disorder. Taking a nematode sample in those parts of the field will be beneficial at any point in the growing season. Best thing to do to take a soil sample is kind of look at an area of the field where things are growing normally, or a good area of the field, and collect 10 to 15 evenly spaced samples across a fairly sizable area. And what I typically do is drop them in a bucket, mix them up with your hand, and then put them into a freezer bag, and then do the same thing across a bad part of the field or a bad area, and space that out so that you're getting a good representation of that overall surface area that looks good and or bad. Probably the two biggest mistakes when sampling for nematodes are, first and foremost, not getting a sample taken in the correct location. Best place to take a soil sample is within that rooting zone to a depth of 6 inches, and then maintaining that depth throughout your soil sampling with a sampling probe that takes that sample to 6 inches at every point in time. Probably the second biggest mistake that someone would take when collecting a nematode sample would be just overall care of that soil sample after you collect it. Whenever I take soil samples, I make sure I keep them cool and dark, and usually just put them within a freezer bag or a Ziploc bag that you have, and then drop them into an ice chest that either has a little bit of ice on the bottom, or some nematologists choose to put them in an ice chest without ice. But just to make sure that you keep it out of the sun, don't put it on the floorboards of the truck, don't put it on the dashboard, somewhere where that's going to stay cool so that you don't kill the nematodes that are present within that soil sample. Samples can be submitted to the Mississippi State University Plant Disease Diagnostic and Nematode Clinic in Starkville, Mississippi, which is in the basement of BOST. That's typically where I send all of my nematode samples, because I know the diagnostician does a good job and usually gets things back in a very timely manner. Depending upon the number of samples you send in, the time of year, and how many samples are in the queue in front of you, you usually can expect your results in, at most a week, but it just kind of depends on the time of day that you drop them off and whatnot. Probably the most important piece of information that comes back with a soil nematode sample would be your overall nematodes present. Sample reports that come back from the nematology lab in Starkville will tell you what's typically above threshold based on those numbers, and give you some sort of management practice or alternative that you can implement in the next season. And depending upon what your crop expectations are and what variety you have there now, it may tell you to plant a resistant variety based on the numbers that are there. Overall sampling size, or the number of samples that you take for a farm, really is based on just about everybody's personal comfort level. To me, probably like a 2-acre sampling grid would be acceptable. Some people would want to go as much as one per acre, so you take 100 samples over 100 100 acres. Really just depends on what your sampling program is for nutrition, who you're relying on for samples. And the best part is that from a nutritional standpoint, you can collect that soil sample to a 6-inch depth. You can do the same thing for a nematode sample. So in essence, you can take one sample for nematodes and soil nutrition, plant nutrition analysis, and then basically you can split the sample in half, and it's just how you care for those samples once you've collected them. Whether you keep it cool for the nematodes or you can just basically throw it on the floorboards of the truck for overall nutritional analysis.